Hello, I'm going to be going over Unit T, big question number 3, which asks, why is a normal tangent graph uphill but a normal tangent graph downhill? Use unit circle to explain. Alright then. So, right here I've drawn a graph that represents tangent, and as you can see I've labeled my 4 quadrants. My 4th quadrant is right here, my 1st quadrant, my 2nd quadrant, my 3rd quadrant. Now, how does this all relate together? Okay, so we know that tangent equals sine over cosine, right? So we know that cosine has to be 0 in order for there to be asymptotes. Now, what has cosine 0? Let's look at a unit circle. Our unit circle, we find a 0 for cosine at pi over 2. And we find another one at 3 pi over 2. So, we know that those are two asymptotes. And as you see here, I've already figured that out right here. The dotted line, the blue dotted line, is where I marked asymptotes. And I've added a -2 because that's our 4th quadrant, which makes it easier for our for us to graph our tangent. So, we have that. Now, what does it mean now? We know that on our unit circle, tangent has different symbols in each quadrant. Looking back on our unit circle, we notice that it's split into 4 parts. If you see it, 4 parts technically. We know that in the 1st quadrant, it's going to be positive. And as you see here, it rises. Now, in the 4th quadrant, it's going to be negative. That's why it drops. It drops right there. Now, in our 2nd quadrant, we know that it drops again. In our 3rd quadrant, we know that it rises. So as you can see, that's why it's graphed like this. So, just as a recap, we know that pi over 2, there's an asymptote at pi over 2, there's an asymptote at 3 pi over 2. And since we're on the left side, it would be negative pi over 2, so we know there's an asymptote right there too. So, then we know that the green line represents how it rises and how it drops. Now, that's just tangent. Moving on to cotangent. Cotangent, in a similar way, is split into 4 parts. We have our 1st quadrant, 2nd quadrant, 3rd quadrant, 4th quadrant. And once again we have pi over 2, pi, 3 pi over 2, and 2 pi. Now, the difference is that cotangent equals cosecant over sine. So now we have to figure out where sine equals 0 in order for there to be asymptotes. Now, going back to our unit circle, sine of 0 is found right here at 0. Sine 0 is found, once more, at pi. Sine 0 is found at 2 pi. So, those are our 3 asymptotes. As you can see here, I've identified them already at 0, pi, and 2 pi. Now, just like we did in tangent, we're going to represent how it rises and it drops. Now, cotangent is similar as tangent. So, since it rises right here, it rises and it drops, it rises and it drops because it's positive, negative, positive, negative. The difference, though, is that cotangent is downhill because we're looking for sine. So there's a difference in symbols in which it is represented. In tangent, it was uphill because we were looking for cosecant. So as you see here, there's a difference in uphill and downhill.